Hello, my wonderful friends, and welcome back to Earthly Delights. I'm truly happy to have you here with me today. Have you ever held a simple glass of water with a fresh plant cutting inside and found yourself checking it again and again, just waiting for that first tiny white root to appear? I know that feeling well. Water propagation is one of the most rewarding little miracles in gardening. There is something deeply satisfying about taking a small piece from a plant you love and watching it become a new living plant of its own. But if you have propagated plants before, you also know the frustrating side of it. Sometimes nothing happens for weeks. Sometimes it takes months. And sometimes the water turns cloudy, the stem softens, rot sets in, and we end up losing a cutting we were so excited about. But it does not always have to happen that way. When we understand how plants naturally heal, respond, and build new roots, we can help them root much faster and with far less failure. In many cases, we can shorten the waiting time dramatically and encourage strong, healthy roots to appear in days instead of dragging on for weeks. Today, I want to walk you through the real secrets behind faster water propagation. We will look at what is happening inside the cutting, why plain water is often not enough, and how a few simple methods inspired by nature, old gardening wisdom, and modern plant science can completely change the way you multiply your plants. So, whether you are growing your indoor jungle, saving a favorite plant, or expanding your garden one cutting at a time, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's grow together. Part 1. The hidden struggle in the glass. Why plain water isn't enough. To understand why some cuttings root quickly while others sit for weeks without progress, we need to start with one simple question. What is really happening when we place a freshly cut stem into a glass of water? The moment we take a cutting, that plant is no longer connected to its original root system. It has been wounded, separated from its main source of water and nutrients, and immediately shifts into survival mode. Around the cut end, the plant begins producing natural rooting hormones called auxins. These hormones help the damaged tissue heal and signal the plant to form new root cells. But here is where many gardeners unknowingly slow the whole process down. We often place that cutting into plain tap water, set it on a windowsill, and simply hope for the best. The water may look clean, but it is usually still, sterile, and lacking the biological support a plant would normally receive in nature. Out in the real world, plants do not grow alone. A broken stem or fallen branch on the forest floor touches living soil filled with beneficial microbes, fungi, minerals, moisture, and chemical signals from nearby plants. That living environment helps guide the plant toward recovery and root formation. A simple glass of water does not naturally provide those same signals. So if we want faster rooting, our goal is not just to keep the cutting wet. Our goal is to make that glass of water behave more like a living, supportive environment. Once we learn to imitate the cooperation found in nature, water propagation becomes far more reliable, and those tiny roots can appear much sooner. Part 2. The breath of life, the power of oxygenation. Now let's talk about one of the most important factors in fast rooting: oxygen. Many people think roots only need water, but that is not true. Roots need oxygen just as much as they need moisture. When a cutting sits in the same still water for several days, the dissolved oxygen in that water begins to drop. As the water becomes stagnant, it creates the kind of low oxygen environment where harmful bacteria can multiply. That is when we start seeing cloudy water, unpleasant smells, soft stems, and eventually stem rot. If you want your cuttings to root faster, you need to keep oxygen available around the base of the stem. The simplest way to do this is by changing the water regularly. Freshening the water every 24 to 48 hours helps restore oxygen, keeps the environment cleaner, and reduces the buildup of bacteria. Even gently swirling the jar once or twice a day can improve oxygen exchange, help prevent the water from becoming stale. For gardeners who want to go a step further, a small aquarium air stone can make a big difference. By sending a steady stream of bubbles through the water, you create something close to a simple hydroponic setup. The cutting receives constant oxygen around the area where new roots are trying to form. This is why aerated water often produces faster, stronger rooting than still water. In some cases, cuttings that normally take weeks may begin showing roots in about a week when the water stays oxygen-rich and clean. It is a simple trick, but it solves one of the biggest hidden problems in water propagation. We stop suffocating the cutting and start giving it the breath of life. Part 3. The Pothos Partnership. Growing in community. Now let me share a method many plant lovers have used with surprising success: rooting slower cuttings together with a fast-rooting plant like golden pothos. If you have ever propagated pothos, you may have noticed how quickly it responds. This plant is naturally vigorous, and it tends to produce roots in water faster than many common houseplants. One reason gardeners pay attention to pothos is because it produces strong levels of auxins. the same natural hormones involved in root formation. The idea is simple. When a fresh pothos cutting is placed in water, some gardeners believe it may release small amounts of these rooting-related compounds into the water. So when you place a slower rooting cutting, such as a ficus or snake plant cutting, in the same jar with pothos, the pothos may act like a companion. The slower plant may benefit from that shared water environment and possibly absorb some of the supportive signals released by the faster grower. Now, I want to be honest about this. Not everyone agrees on exactly why this method works. Some people believe the hormone effect is very small. Others think the real benefit may come from more frequent water changes, better care, or the shared microbial environment created when living cuttings grow together. But many everyday gardeners continue to swear by this pothos partnership because they have seen slow cuttings respond better when they are not alone. And when we think about how plants live in nature, this idea makes sense. Plants are rarely isolated. They grow in communities, sharing soil, microbes, moisture, and chemical messages. So whether the benefit comes from natural hormones, a more active water environment, or simply the strength of a fast-rooting companion, placing a slow-rooting cutting with pothos is a practical method worth trying. Sometimes, the best thing we can do is let plants support each other. Part 4, the ancient elixir. The magic of willow water. If we want to understand real, time-tested gardening wisdom, we need to look back at what growers used long before store-bought rooting powders existed. For generations, gardeners relied on a simple natural solution known as willow water. Willow trees are famous for their ability to survive, recover, and grow with incredible strength. In many cases, even a broken willow branch pushed into moist soil can begin forming roots. That strong rooting ability comes from compounds found in young willow bark and stems, especially indole-butyric acid, or EBA, which is a natural rooting hormone, and salicylic acid, a plant-supporting compound that helps reduce problems from bacteria and fungi around wounded tissue. You can make this old gardener's remedy in a very simple way. Gather young green or yellow willow twigs, ideally about pencil thickness. Remove the leaves, cut the twigs into small pieces about 1 inch long, place them in a jar, and pour boiling water over them as if you were making tea. Then let the mixture steep for 24 to 48 hours before straining out the pieces. What you have now is a free natural rooting solution. When cuttings are soaked in willow water, they receive a gentle hormonal boost while the wounded end gets extra protection during the early rooting stage. It is one of those beautiful examples of nature offering exactly what a struggling plant needs to begin again. Part 5, the aloe vera miracle, nature's healing gel. But if you do not have access to a willow tree, there is another natural helper that many gardeners can find much more easily: aloe vera. Most of us know aloe vera as a healing plant for skin, small cuts, and sunburns, but it can also be useful for plant cuttings. Fresh aloe vera gel contains enzymes, amino acids, vitamins, and natural plant-supporting compounds that can encourage root development. It also has antibacterial and antifungal properties, which makes it especially helpful when a cutting has an open wound that can easily rot in water. To use it, take about 1 teaspoon of fresh aloe vera gel and mix it well into a cup of clean water until it breaks down as much as possible. Then place your cutting into that solution. The aloe helps coat and protect the cut area while creating a more supportive environment for new root cells to form. This simple method turns plain water into something gentler and more nourishing for the cutting. It reminds us that many of the same plants we value for healing people can also help other plants recover, repair, and grow. Part 6, the power of darkness. Why roots hide from the sun? Now let's think about how a plant is built in nature. Leaves are designed to reach toward light. Roots, on the other hand, are designed to grow in the cool, dark, protected space beneath the soil. Clear glass jars are beautiful, and I understand why so many gardeners love them. They let us watch every tiny root as it appears. But for the plant, full light around the rooting zone is not always ideal. Roots naturally prefer darkness, and strong light hitting still water can also encourage algae to grow. Algae may not kill a cutting immediately, but it can compete for oxygen and make the water less healthy for delicate new roots. When the water becomes green or slimy, the cutting has to struggle in an environment that is no longer clean and balanced. So, if you want to encourage faster and healthier root formation, try keeping the root zone dark while the leaves still receive bright, indirect light. You can use dark glass, ceramic containers, opaque cups, or simply wrap a piece of fabric around a clear jar. This small adjustment makes the water environment feel more like the natural darkness of soil. By giving the leaves light and giving the future roots darkness, we respect the plant's natural design. The cutting feels more secure, algae pressure is reduced, and the plant can focus its energy on building a strong foundation. Part 7, the sensation of touch. The thigmomorphogenesis. Secret. Now let's move into one of the most fascinating ideas in plant growth. And it comes from a scientific word that sounds complicated at first. Thigmomorphogenesis. In simple terms, this means plants can change the way they grow when they feel touch, pressure, or mechanical stress. A plant is not as passive as it looks. It responds to wind, resistance, contact, and the physical world around it. In nature, roots do not grow in empty space. They push against soil, stones, organic matter, and moisture pockets, and that contact helps guide the plant as it anchors itself. This is why some gardeners have noticed an interesting trick with woody or semi-woody cuttings, such as rosemary or lantana. If you gently secure the stem to a firm support, like a small wooden stick, using natural twine, roots may begin forming near the area where the twine lightly touches the stem. That gentle, steady pressure seems to imitate the resistance a stem would feel in soil. The contact can encourage the plant to direct rooting energy to that specific point, where new adventitious roots may begin to develop. To me, this is one of those beautiful reminders that plants have their own language. Sometimes that language is not sound, but pressure, moisture, darkness, oxygen, and touch. By giving the cutting a small point of physical contact, we are helping it understand where to anchor, where to heal, and where to begin building its new root system. Part 8, the critical transition. Moving from water to soil without shock. Now we come to one of the most important stages in the entire propagation process, moving a rooted cutting from water into soil. You may have done everything right. You may have used clean water, good oxygen, willow water, darker containers, or even a companion cutting. And now finally you see a beautiful cluster of fresh roots. But the work is not finished yet. One of the biggest mistakes gardeners make is leaving cuttings in water for too long. Water roots and soil roots are not exactly the same. Water roots are usually softer, more fragile, and less prepared to push through a dense potting mix. If a cutting stays in water for months, it becomes used to that easy, aquatic environment. Then, when we suddenly move it into soil, the plant can struggle badly, wilt, or even collapse from transplant shock. The better approach is to move the cutting into soil once the main roots are around 1 to 2 inches long and you begin to see small secondary roots branching out. That is usually the stage when the cutting is strong enough to adjust, but not so dependent on water that it resists the change. When you pot it up, use a light, fluffy, well-aerated mix. Adding something like perlite can help keep the soil open so those delicate roots are not crushed or suffocated. During the first week, keep the soil evenly moist but never soggy. Place the young plant in a protected spot with gentle light while it adjusts. That careful transition is what turns successful water rooting into a strong, lasting plant. The goal is not just to grow roots in a jar. The goal is to help that cutting become a healthy plant that can thrive in real soil. Conclusion: gardening is never just about forcing a plant to grow. It is a patient partnership. When we take a cutting, we are asking that plant to do something extraordinary, to heal, survive, and create a whole new root system from a wounded stem. And as we have seen, the best way to help isn't always by reaching for harsh chemicals or complicated methods. Often it is by understanding how nature already works. When we add oxygen to the water, use willow water, try aloe vera, place a fast-rooting pothos beside a slower cutting, keep the roots in darkness, or use gentle contact to guide rooting. We are not fighting the plant's nature. We are working with it. A simple glass of water can become much more than plain water. It can become a small, living environment that gives a cutting the signals it needs to heal and grow. So now I want to ask you, which method are you going to try first? Will you refresh your water more often, add an air stone, make willow water, or test the Pothos partnership with a cutting that has always been slow for you? Share your experience in the comments, whether it worked beautifully or taught you something new. That is how we all grow together, just like our plants. And if this video helped you bring a little more green life into your home or garden, please subscribe, give it a like, and share it with someone who loves plants too. Until next time, keep learning from the soil, keep caring for your plants with patience, and keep finding joy in the little earthly delights. Happy propagating!